Alright guys, thanks for joining us. We're here at the IMARC Conference 2019 in Melbourne, joined here by Kerry Stevenson, who's just run her own event. Welcome to Melbourne, Kerry.
It's a bit different down here in Melbourne. Look, I understand the need for people to want to protest. I understand for them to have a voice and for them to express themselves. But what I don't understand is most of these people have got mobile phones. The guy speaking behind me right now is talking on a megaphone. We're speaking on a microphone, but there is a disconnect between the fact that what this a mobile phone, actually comes from the mining industry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, do you think, like, we'll get their point of view as well a bit later on. Do you think some of their concerns are validated, or what are they actually? I mean, we'll get from them what they're actually protesting, but what do you think it's all about? Because obviously we do need mining to build the stuff that we've got, and we enjoy the benefits of, right?
I think a lot of these people are protesting because they're ill-informed about what mining is, what it brings to this country. I've said it before, I'll say it again on camera. We bring jobs and we bring wealth to Australia. And for them to try and shut the mining industry down, in fact, we're standing here in Melbourne. Melbourne was built off the back of mining.
Yeah, well, how do we, I mean, if the problem is misinformation, which for a lot of these issues it is, right, we kind of, the views seem to be very skewed. How can we inform people, whether it's on, let's say, that side or the other side, what process can we go through to kind of let people know, how it actually, things operate and what we need?
Well, first of all, you've got to have an open mind to be able to have the conversation. I know for a fact that the organisers of IMARC tried to engage and tried to have a discussion. They're not interested. They're interested in protesting and creating trouble and trying to shut something down. Now, they're doing it. I mean, there's a guy just behind me who's got a couple of plastic water bottles that he's trying to hand out to people. Good on him. Well, without the oil and gas industry, you wouldn't have a water bottle like that. If they're that concerned about the environment, what are they using? How did they get here today? Did they use transport? That comes from mining. How do they communicate with each other? On mobile phones. That comes from mining. So from my point of view, I just think that they've got to understand that their world that they live in, a lot of it comes from mining, and our mining industry is actually very, very responsible.
Well, it certainly has been over the years. There's been an increased push for ethical and obviously environmental concerns. We probably need to get these people inside the conference, so maybe they can make some money as well. So, but like in terms of, I've got to ask your opinion on climate change. I mean, what are your thoughts personally? I know this is a topic that divides a lot of people, but I'm curious to get your take on it. I mean, I've been public with my take on it before as well. So.
Well, most people know my view on climate change. I'd like to see every single one of these protesters walk down the river here and pick up some rubbish. To me, it's about the rubbish that's created, and it's about the waste that we use. We're a consumer society. Again, everyone wants the latest iPhone. So my view is, if we focus more on waste, we're not going to change the climate per se, but we can change waste. We can change the amount of plastic in the ocean. We can change the way people live. I've got a friend of mine, Phil Madden. He creates no waste, zero waste, because he uses renewable, recyclable material.
Yeah. So it definitely seems like there's some middle ground that can be found, and hopefully we can all...
Philip, there's always middle ground. What you don't have here is you've got extremism, and like anything...
Welcome to Melbourne.
Yeah, but in any sort of extreme environment, your mind goes into anger, and when people are angry, they don't think logically. This is not logical.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the concerns I see, especially with... because I do think there needs to be a bit of middle ground when it comes to the environment thing. I think everyone acknowledges we need to look after the environment, but it can go a bit too far. It can be used for control purposes as well, as what we've seen with the carbon tax. And unfortunately, what you're seeing is a lot of the youth, I mean, it's great that they're pro-environment, but they're not understanding the full implications of things like a carbon tax or slowing down, potential growth of technology and things like this based on, one-sided propaganda. We need our own chant over here.
But let me also say to you, today is Wednesday. It is a working day. Are they all? Are any of them working? Well, they're here protesting. I understand that, but if they're getting government support, that actually comes. A lot of the taxes do come from the mining industry to support this country.
So in a roundabout way, the mining industry is kind of supporting these protests, if you want to look at it that way.
If you want to look at it that way, but I just think, as I say before, I think it'd be great if we could just talk to them and have them understand a lot more. I spoke to somebody just before, And I said to him, you're carrying a mobile phone. Do you know that comes from mining? He had absolutely no idea.
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of education needs to take place, and it's great that there's a lot of unemployed people, because I'm actually looking to hire some people, so we'll see how we go a bit later on. Is there any other final comments you got while you're with us?
I think that the organisers of IMARC have done a great job, and I actually think the Victorian Police and what they're doing is amazing. But again, these people don't understand. The police force here is paid for from taxpayers' money. There's a disconnect. Let's get educated, guys.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully, these videos can do a little bit. If you are looking for a job, put your details below. Otherwise, we're going to get some more views from our people here as well. So, speak to you soon. All right, guys, I'm joined by Zane, one of the protesters here at the event. Zane, thanks for joining us. Can you run us through why you're here and why all these people are here vocal today at the IMARC conference?
So there's a few reasons that we're gathered here, and they're all important. One of the reasons that we're here is that these mining companies are typically pushing Indigenous people off their land, whether it's in Australia or in other parts of the world, in order to extract resources from their land. In many cases, it's against the very explicit wishes of the First Nations people there, and those people are being forced off their land quite violently to get at the resources. When those resources are mined, there's often extremely lax environmental protections, so you get really shoddily built tailings dams that later collapse. You get finely powdered rock that gets that can liberate heavy metals and toxic stuff from within the rock. The rock is often treated with further chemicals to create a solution that extracts the mineral that they're after. So they're creating really nasty sort of silt and sludge and tailings, and putting that in these dams that may collapse, or just pumping it straight into rivers. It's stuff that they would not get away with here in Australia, but because of that power imbalance between a relatively small group of rich countries and then the global south, a bunch of poorer countries, they just go in there with disregard for the environment. They'll get their little bit of money from extracting those minerals, but in the process, they'll thoroughly pollute rivers. They'll wipe out the ability of people living fairly subsistence kind of lifestyles to be able to go fishing in those rivers, to be able to grow crops along the side of those rivers. So that's an issue. And then there's, of course, the climate change thing. That's been discussed extensively for the last 20 years. Years go by, still nothing continues to happen, and I think it was the top 10 biggest polluting corporations in the planet are meeting in here, and they just want to have business as usual. They want to continue to extract as much as those fossil resources from the ground and burn them as they can. They probably know in their heart of hearts that at some point we've got to do something about this climate change thing, but they want to drag it out and delay it and sabotage any sort of policy that constrains use of fossil fuels for as long as possible, because the more of that shit gets locked in the ground, that's profits that they're not going to be able to extract and turn into cash in their bank accounts. Yep. And we're saying that is the long-term economics of digging that shit out of the ground, deglaciating the whole planet, melting the polar ice caps. These people ultimately want to trigger multi-level sea rise. This whole fucking area here, at the rate we're going, is going to be underwater 100 years from now. How is that good long-term economic planning? But that's,
I'll tell you one way it is. My parents live a little bit up high, so if the sea levels rise, I have beachfront property. But honestly, I'm joking there. But
good luck to you. But,
there's some honest concerns, and
there's hundreds of millions of people around the world live in cities that are going to be inundated, and Australia is the most arid populated continent on Earth. We've got this really serious drought. Climate change has somewhat unpredictable impacts on weather patterns, but it's safe to conclude that there's going to be parts of Australia that will just get drier than what they currently are. It's going to smash food production here and in other parts of the world. But the global economic system that we've got, it's all about maximum profit right now. There is no scope within the existing system to think about 20, 50 and 100 years from now. And we've had all these ideas about market mechanisms, but fundamentally, I'm a socialist, I'm a Marxist, and I don't think that capitalism is capable of solving this. And that's not because I want to go and, I'm not like some bloodthirsty person who wants to kill capitalists. It's nothing personal. Yeah. I just don't think that capitalism as a system, it's built on the premise of endless growth. It's built on the idea of...
Just with that, I think there's and look, I agree with everything you've just said up until this point. So I do think, especially with the way the economy is run at the moment, it's infinite growth paradigm, which is unsustainable. Like it's a bit ridiculous. We have things like planned obsolescence, where we're creating products just for the sake of increasing GDP and things like that. Just to stop you, the only thing where I disagree with where you turn there is that with capitalism, I don't think what we've got at the moment actually is capitalism. It's probably a combination of a bit of fascism, where you've got these governments and corporations working together. Because in a free market, at least in a capitalistic sense, corporations are allowed to fail. Whether it's banks, they don't get support from government, and the people get to vote with their dollar. So if people don't want a company, they just don't buy their stuff. But
people love to talk about Marxism, and they go, it doesn't matter what the ideal of Marxism is, the lived reality of Marxism is blah, and they point to Stalinist China and Stalinist Russia and blah, blah, blah. Well, what I'm saying is the lived reality of capitalism is a long way from the free market ideal that you talk about.
Yeah.
The lived reality of capitalism is that whoever is the biggest existing corporations, they hold the most sway over the state.
Yep.
And, our protest here could be viewed within market terms. A bunch of people should be free to go and stand and hold arms and blockade a conference of a bunch of arseholes who are destroying the planet. But that's not allowed. The cops come and smash us. I think that the state protects whoever is the largest corporations. So, yeah, the ideal of free market capitalism is just that. It's an ideal. It's not a...
Yeah. Well, I feel like what we've got now, it's like you're saying the corporations are controlling the politicians. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the existing sort of... the incumbent, faction of capital, the biggest, most dominant chunk of capital, are still embedded. I mean, they're all invested in each other. Banks, insurance companies, fossil fuels. But at the end of the day, they just can't get past the idea that there's all of this money buried in the ground, in all these gas and oil and coal and uranium reserves. We'd be stupid not to dig it up and turn it into cash in our bank accounts. And I can't see capitalism looking at the... Capitalism is incapable of thinking of its own best interests 100 years from now. It's only capable of looking at 5 and 10 years from now. It can't help itself. It has to dig that shit up and get that money.
Well, in terms of, because the next question I want to get to is about solutions for this. And one of them to kind of throw in there, I feel like when it comes to things like capitalism, when I say more probably entrepreneurship, that's where solutions often come from. So just to throw one example is there was a big issue with drink drivers and obviously people getting killed in that sense. And I mean, the government tried to clamp down by bigger fines and bigger punishments, but the only thing that ends up working is a free market idea of something like Uber. I'm just wondering whether you see that in the mining space, or what do you think are the solutions? Because I mean, it's pretty clear that there are some issues that people are aware of, and obviously for some people it's better to overlook those issues because there's a big profit attached to it, right? But where do you see those solutions coming from? Obviously one being technology, but where else do you see, how can we solve the things and bring to light a lot of the issues that you here, Zane, are raising?
Yeah, so part of it is technology, and we've got a government at the moment that's been cutting funding from the CSIRO. This is another thing, is that I guess free market ideologues like to think that they've got a monopoly on innovation and entrepreneurship, but some of the best innovations to emerge have come out of publicly funded scientific research bodies like the CSIRO. They've done amazing work into solar thermal, solar photovoltaics. Wi-Fi technology was invented by the CSIRO. So as a Marxist, yeah, sure, entrepreneurship is important, but I have a different concept of entrepreneurship to probably what you or other free market ideologues would have.
Yeah, and that's fine.
If we put more resources into the CSIRO, that's good, but it can't just be research. We also have to sink large amounts of money, tens of billions of dollars, into commercialising stuff and developing economies of scale. And for some reason, there's this idea that the state is not allowed to invest in a range of new technologies, some of which will succeed and some of which will fail. It is only the private sector that is allowed to experiment with new technologies, see what works and what doesn't. So a few areas, some of the people here that are protesting legitimately talk about rare earths, some of which is used in renewable technology, some of which is used in niche solar technology, some of which is used like lithium, which goes into car batteries. A lot of that is nasty stuff. So as we move away from fossil fuels, we also need to research ways to do 100% renewables as cleanly as possible and not be relying on some of these really nasty chemicals. Now, if you talk to a bunch of the people in there, they would say, oh, you're hypocrites because you want to move to renewables and that means just a different type of toxic mining. Well, that's not the case. We know that we can build annular generating wind turbines, like the Enercon wind turbines that are made from opposing sets of copper coils which excite each other. Okay, you need to use copper. You don't have to mine all this nasty rare earths to make the big permanent magnets. We know that you can have solar thermal technology which uses molten salt. Again, yeah, you've got to dig stuff up to make reinforced concrete and mirrors and all of that, but it's a hell of a lot better doing that than having Tesla big batteries that are all built on lithium technology. And this is a key area. There was a solar thermal project proposed for South Australia and it fell over because they couldn't get finance. In a sane world, the federal government would have stepped in and gone, look, if we need to spend a bit more money, so be it, because in the long term, we've got to find ways to have dispatchable energy that's not reliant on toxic lithium.
Yeah.
So those are the sort of areas where there should be more investment in research, yes, but there also needs to be a lot of investment in mass deployment of this stuff. So I support renationalising the energy system, investing in publicly owned renewable energy, and investing in technologies like solar thermal, which are currently niche, but we know if we put the money into it, and there's been economic modelling of this done, it's like anything, it's like a prototype of a car. Once you mass produce them, you're able to refine it and bring the cost down.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I get the feeling that actually a lot of the people actually want the same thing. It's just they've got different ideas of how that solution is going to come about. Because I do feel the government could be spending the money better. With that said, the government does get the money from people that produce. So, I mean, if there aren't entrepreneurs and companies, the government doesn't get money.
A lot of these companies that are here don't pay any tax. They squirrel it all away. They pay payroll. Their workers, it should be said, pay payroll tax. But a lot of these companies don't pay any tax. So I think that argument is a little bit problematic as well.
Oh, you're getting no complaints from me. I reckon companies like Amazon and Google that are paying zero tax, it's an absolute joke. Not to mention that Amazon's putting people out of business as well. But no, you do raise some valid points, and I hope our audience can digest those. And hopefully we can find some middle ground and get some information out there and work out how we can going forward make things better for everyone. So yeah, thanks for joining us, Zane. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, mate. It was awesome.
Cheers.